All right, everybody. We've got another very special guest for y'all this week. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Paul Carroll. Welcome, Paul.
How you doing?
Good, good, and a lot better now. We checked the box of having a guest from Ireland on the show, so thanks for doing that first time.
Gonna
You
pull
know,
down my map and put the
yeah,
pin in
yeah,
Ireland.
yeah,
Done. Don't need
yeah.
them anymore.
Like the ham radio guys with the big maps and like the big red dots. Yeah, I got it. It's just a big empty map because nobody talks to us. There's just one. It's just one red dot now. It's got Paul. It's Dublin. It's on there. So thanks for being here, man. It's your first time on the show, and we got to do the run you through the gauntlet of doing an origin story and how you got involved with writing comics and doing these anthologies and stuff. So I don't know if you want to just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so my entry to comics is a bit weird. So I've been writing prose before I got into comics, which is kind of that's the normal part of it. But when I was doing a master's degree in Dublin City University, it was in multimedia, and our thesis was a group project, which is insane for a master's degree. But we had to make a documentary, or at least use the different sorts of skills that we picked up during the course of the year. So we did a documentary on comic book culture in Ireland. And before that, I knew a couple of comic creators, but like I knew one of them from an online writing group that I'd set up when I was 16, back when Bebo was a thing. We're going back that far back.
Wow.
And she still makes comics, which is great. But I didn't really know that people could just go and make comics. Like, it was weird. When there was one person doing it, I was like, that's really cool. I know someone who makes comics. I didn't know that was just a thing everyone else was doing as well.
Yeah.
So when I was doing this project, then I'd never been to a convention because I always worked weekends, and I ended up going to 6 in the space of like 3 months.
Wow.
And all over Ireland, and traveling all over the country to interview different people, including like a day trip down to Ballycotton in Cork to interview Will Sliney.
Oh, wow.
And like, Ireland looks small, but our public transport system is not great. So it actually is like a 4-hour journey from Dublin city centre to Ballycotton, because you have to go into Cork City first. So it was a long day, long summer, and it was like my trial by fire entry. And then I set up a comic review site after that, because I was like, okay, this lets me just keep forcing myself onto these people and talking to them.
Yeah, right.
Until a couple of them said, why did you actually just write comics? And I was like, oh yeah, maybe I will.
So we keep forcing ourselves on people like you, Paul, and nobody's ever asked us to write comics. So here it's 7 years later. Nobody's asked for it, so here we are. I'm just
hey, you should write comics.
Yeah, just Travis Gibb.
Yeah, just Travis Gibb. Yep.
So because I was just constantly at these events, I then ended up I joined the setup of another event in Dublin, which was a monthly market. And one of the co-founders of it wanted to make a comic about his cat. He had a new cat who was quite aggressive. Not even aggressive. It was a kitten, so it was attacking him because it discovered it had claws. And the cat's name was Frankie. Like, the cat was a total coward. I was in Garrett's house once when Frankie was still around, and I got out of the bed because I stayed overnight before going to a con. And next thing here is the cat running out the door, the bell just chiming on the way out because I moved. So it was a total scaredy cat, but it is the basis of the first comic that I worked on.
Wow.
And like that, we built on the character through like little zines and things like that. And that's going back to like 2016, published the first one 2017. And that's when Gareth Luby was the artist. That's when we met Gary Maloney, and the three of us set up Limit Break Comics. And that's when we started actually taking comics seriously. And that's when I started writing more of them, and didn't just decide, hey, I've written a 40-page comic script, let's go make that, because it was the first thing I'd written was a 40-page comic script that no one's ever seen before. Wow. So it hides in my drawer to this day, handwritten. Not even typed.
Never publish your first one. That's the like rule of thumb. Don't publish the first one.
I need to edit it a lot because I still like the idea, but I can't remember if it's even written any good, because it's been, oh god, now to think about it, it's been 7 years. I wrote that probably when you guys started this podcast. Yeah. So
yep.
That's gonna be a therapeutic, painful journey for you, but
yeah. I'll eventually look back on the script and then go, okay, it needs to be like cut into 3 because it's 40 pages of just condensing story. Because
Yeah.
in my head it'll be 6 40-page issues.
Oh wow.
Nobody does that.
Yeah, no, that's insanity.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
so that book might exist someday, but not as
Yeah.
40-page issues, and definitely not just 6 of them because there's too much story in one issue.
And
yeah,
I think,
so that was when I got started with it all. And
but luckily for us, because that was the next question I wanted to talk to you about before we talked about Wish Upon a Star. You said you did a documentary on comic books in Ireland, and I think if you could just give us a little insight into what the industry or the community looks like around there.
Ireland is very strange because it's a small country, but we have like 30 people working professionally in comics, like full time.
Yeah.
Across different fields, so like colorists, letterers, writers, artists. A lot of them will do multiple different jobs, or like some of them, like Nate Stockman, might make most of his money off selling originals if he's in between jobs. But like that's just sort of how Ireland works. We just have a weirdly high amount of professional comic creators for the size of the country, and like most of them working with the American publishers. So it's not like we're just, because there's no local publishing scene in Ireland. Like we have one publisher who publishes comics rarely. It's as part of their broader line, so it's O'Brien Press, and all of their books focus on Irish folklore and Irish history.
Yeah, and that's what I was.
Great, but it's a very niche market.
Right, and you've worked on some projects like that before, right? With Irish folklore and things like that.
Yeah, and I'd even applied for Arts Council funding on that one and didn't get it. That's comics are still in that weird space in Ireland where even though there are loads of people making them professionally, compared to the number of writers who are actually making full-time living, more comic creators are making a full-time living here than writers.
Wow.
But even though we applied for the same funding, we don't get it as much as the rest of them.
Because they're funny books to them still, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, mine definitely, aside from Meowch, which is actually an action comedy, mine are not funny. Like, I lean into horror and sadness. Because that's what the Irish do.
Yeah, right.
It's just our brand.
Right.
We sometimes laugh and then the rest of the time we're sad.
Well, that's the American dialect to kind of poke fun at comics. Is they're funny books. They're just funny books, and then I'm like, this is Dark Knight Returns. There's nothing funny here, guys.
Yeah, this is very serious stuff. Yeah,
this Batman almost killed himself.
Yeah, come on.
Almost all my pitches to the Arts Council now are, this whole thing is just an exploration of grief or an exploration of mental health. And it's just like, here, all the sad topics you love the poets to write about.
Yeah,
just with pictures.
That's awesome.
So living in Ireland, though, growing up, like it doesn't sound like you read a ton of comics, but do you know what the comic, like what the market was? Were you guys getting Superman, Batman, or were you getting more of the English comics like 2000 AD? Or what do you think was going on?
Secondhand information that I have from people, because I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So like I was getting comics bits and pieces, and like we would have there's a publisher, Panini, that published in like a magazine format where they combine like 2 or 3 issues into one. And I would guess with those sometimes, but we didn't really have a lot of money. Like that was like, to get one issue of those, it was like 3 weeks of like pocket money from my parents. So like I had nothing growing up.
Right.
And my nanny would always get us have you heard of the Dandy and the Beano? They're like 2 of the UK. So they're UK comics, but they're for kids, and they do an annual of them every year. So it's just a big collection of them. And every year before she passed, she would get myself and my brother one or the other. So I'd always get Dandy, he'd always get Beano, and we would read them and then swap them over.
Yeah,
so like we had loads of comics growing up, but not the American ones.
Okay.
And we had a couple of shops here like over the years. Some of them went, some of them stayed. So there was access to American comics. I'm not sure I don't know how big it was back then, but I know the shop, like Forbidden Planet, survived.
Oh yeah, Forbidden Planet.
And one of the owners of Big Bang, he owned one other shop, I think, before he's in Big Bang, or maybe 2 other shops. But he's been in the business in and out until Big
Mhm.
Bang actually, found its feet and has been able to keep going. But so like the interest was always there, but I think largely a lot of people would grow up with the UK comics like 2000
Mhm.
AD,
Yep.
because they would land on the magazine rack rather than having to go into a comic shop.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I didn't get to grow up with them because we were we were just a poor North Side family. My parents could not afford to have 3 boys.
Yeah, that's
That's usually the case.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they're like, okay, we probably would rather feed you guys than give you Marvel comics. It's probably work on that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and like my parents never really saw the appeal of comics growing up.
Yeah.
And even now when they see them come in the door, it's like, more of these things. Like, well, I wrote it, so you can't say no.
Right. That's funny.
It's funny as I'm looking at the Beano and Dandy pages online right now, and it kind of reminds me of what we would get in like the Sunday newspaper.
Newspaper.
Yeah,
comics. Yep.
I mean, they're done in comic style, but just like the art and how the panel layout is, like I could see this being in a Sunday paper.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit longer.
I think a lot of them would be, yeah.
Yeah.
They would have like a magazine for them, but they would have also put some of the strips into the papers.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, and like we got the Spider-Man one that would go into the newspapers, like the 3 panels a day sort of thing. So we got that. Anytime I could steal a paper from my dad, I'd be reading
that. That's awesome. And I wonder if, like, I mean, you talked about like Irish. I feel like Irish folklore and the myths and everything are a pretty huge part of the country itself. But I wonder if that contributes to why there's so many American comic book writers. I mean, artists, illustrators. I wonder if there's just like a high potential for people to be more interested in telling stories or like interesting stories, because I feel like Ireland versus the US, like our folklore and stuff isn't really fun to talk about. I mean, we don't have like cool stories to tell, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like you have, like you said, for like horror and things like that, you could probably tell a lot more captivating stories.
And we don't see that folklore over here that often.
No, we don't. Yeah.
I know there's a Wonder Woman run with Irish folklore in it, but that's the only thing that comes to mind.
I don't know how accurate it is either. I haven't.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Typically, when and I mean this in the best way, but when American writers try to tackle Irish folklore, they're reading the first thing off Google and taking it as canon, and
right.
So that was my experience when I was doing Turning Roads, which was my first anthology project, which was like, it was my pandemic baby. I still call it that. And I had an open call, and there were people who were like, "Oh, if I'm not Irish, can I still pitch?" I was like, "Yes, it's open to everyone."
Right.
No, I only got 37 pitches for that one, which was nothing compared to what the next 3 did. But like even some of the Irish creators, I feel like they looked up the names of an Irish fairy and used that as the basis of the story, without any of the knowledge of the story itself. Like the puka was a big one. I got like 15 puka myths thrown at me.
What is that? What is that one? I don't even know what that is.
So you know what a leprechaun is?
Yes.
So a leprechaun is supposed to bring good fortune, and a puka in some versions brings bad fortune. But no, those are very basic descriptions of the 2 different types, because the stories are much more intricate, and depending on who's telling the story, they'll do different things. It's like it's the same with the Greek myths. Like Zeus will do. He'll have different children with different people depending on who's telling the story.
Right.
And it's like that with Irish folklore. Depending on who's telling the story, it'll change, and you get different aspects of different creatures. And our gods are weird because sometimes they're saints and sometimes they're humans, and it depends on how long the Brits have been in the country, basically, and Catholics. So once Catholicism arrived and once the Brits arrived, our stories changed a lot. Yeah. So we like our gods became fairies, and then they became saints. And so it was lots of downgrading and reducing the importance of different people.
And definitely not.
I tried. No, I tried to reduce as much of the anti-Brit sentiments in Turning Roads as I could because I wanted people to enjoy reading the book no matter where they were. But then there was one story. It wasn't anti-Brit, but it was anti-Catholic Church because Ireland has a not very healthy relationship with the Catholic Church,
Right.
which I'm sure you know about. We don't need to go into it here.
Yeah, right.
But
know a little bit about it.
One of the one of the stories decided instead of dealing with a myth directly, that it was the changeling myth they were working with. So it's Colin Mahoney and Mary Rowland were writing it. But Mary was the artist. She's from Brazil, but now lives in Kerry. That's what Ireland is.
Wow.
50% Brazilians, and
That's funny.
Colin decided he would pitch the story, but it was the changeling myth dealing with the mother and baby homes and the taking away of children. So it was that, and it was very anti-Catholic, and I'm like, I approve of this message. I went to a Catholic college,
right,
which was a very weird experience. They don't exist in Ireland. They're not a thing. The fact that I went to one still confuses people. It was a teaching college, so I wanted to be a teacher once upon a time. And then a student threw a table at me, and that just made me go, I don't want that to be my life.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. What the hell? That's crazy.
Yeah. It was wild. It was my last teaching placement, and I was like, I think I'm done with teaching now in a formal classroom setting.
Yeah, you don't need tables being hurled at you.
No, especially not when I'm just trying to stop someone attacking someone else. So,
right.
All I did was call his name.
Yeah, that's insane. And with my ignorance too, I mean, the only one of the only ones I know about is the Banshees in Ireland. Yes. I mean, I've seen a lot of stories about those, and that seems to be more on the horror side, right? Unless that's how it's always depicted as in the US. But
yeah, and it depends on which way the Banshee story is being told. So sometimes it's, if you hear the Banshee screaming, she's going to come and kill someone, but that's not really it. It's when you hear the Banshee screaming, somebody has died, or somebody is going to die. So she's because it just comes from the weeping woman. Like it's literally like the name Banshee is literally female fairy. Ban is woman, and she is the Irish word for fairy. So it's that's literally all her name was. Wow. But it was just the idea of a weeping woman with the veil down over her face, crying outside a funeral, and like that. So it is sometimes used as a horror thing, but it's used for tension and for making people kind of reevaluate how things are going and their relationships with people. Like the Banshees of Inisherin, which came out.
Yes. Yeah, I did watch that movie.
2022.
Yep, a couple years ago.
And people thought going to it that it would be like it would actually have a Banshee, but the movie gets its name from a song in the movie. So it's just that it's and it deals slightly with the idea of a Banshee and the supernatural, but not as it's not central to it. The whole central aspect to it is male relationships in Ireland and a trapped artist.
That makes you explaining it that way, because I did see that movie, and it, like you said, is about relationships between people. That makes more sense of like, it's not just always somebody dying, it's a more depressing thing of like something is missing or has left, right? Like a relationship has died. Okay, wow, that's interesting. But yeah, so we had talked about how you did some anthologies for folklore, and now that's what we're doing again today with this Kickstarter. But it's focused on sci-fi, right? So we have Wish Upon a Star, which is a sci-fi anthology, but I don't know if you want to elaborate more on what that is.
Yeah, so I should explain where the others came from first, just as kind of prelude. So we have an initial trilogy, which was Turning Roads, Down Below, and Fractured Realms, and each of them takes a different area of myth. So Irish folklore for the first one, then we had Greek myth for Down Below, and Norse myth for Fractured Realms, and each of them combined with another genre. So Turning Roads was Irish folklore with science fiction fantasy. Down Below was Greek myth with crime noir, and Fractured Realms was Norse horror. So we had three kind of old mythologies, and now we're moving on to a modern mythology trilogy. So that's where this one comes in with fairy tales. So Wish Upon a Star is fairy tales combined with far future sci-fi.
Oh, that's really cool.
Which is
Yeah, and Chris got the page pulled up here. I know you said crime noir with Greek mythology, and Chris is like, I need to read that as soon as possible. That's right up his alley.
I think both of I mean, the new one sounds good too, but the first
Yeah.
two both got me interested. 'Cause
Right.
Sci-fi Irish folklore, like,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Irish folklore, so that everything there will be new to me.
Yeah.
And it's pretty light touch. Like, it's not like you don't need to be familiar with all the stories to understand where they're all going. And that's more of the case as the books go on as well, because we got a better idea of how to refine the narrative over the 4 pages with the different writers, so that they're touching upon the myth in a way that the reader will connect with it more easily. Because sometimes connecting the dots between these things is a bit of a struggle. And Turning Girls was the first one I'd done. I was editing it just after I had COVID, so it was not a good time. But it was also the only time I had. I wouldn't have been able to do it if the pandemic hadn't happened.
Right. You had a lot of extra time.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing by this cover here, we're going to get Snow White Gundam and the 7. I don't know what those are. Blaster things.
So
7 Sons. Yeah.
It's 7 Dwarf Stars.
Oh my god!
Why did we get that?
How did we miss that? Oh, that's so smart! Wow.
So that was just Nate Stockman. So when it comes to the covers and for the prints, the only rules I have for people is that it has to fit the theme. So there isn't a Snow White mech story, but there are mech stories in the book, but there's no Snow White one. That was just like Nate had the cover done before we had selected the stories for the book. So we had 220 something pitches in for the book.
Wow.
And amazingly, no one decided to go for Snow White as a mech. Who would have thought? I don't know where Nate pulled it out from.
Yeah,
but he sent me the concept of it. It's like, I was thinking, Snow White and the dwarves, the Dwarf Stars. So I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then I just asked him, who would he want to color it? And because it's what we've done each time. So Declan Shalvey did all his own work on the first one, but then Stephen Mooney doesn't like coloring his own work. So when he did his cover for Down Below, he asked if we could ask Trina Farrell to color it, because they've worked together on Half Past Danger. And then when we came to Fractured Realms, we asked Nick Roach, and he gave us a list of people, and the list started with JP Jordan, who's another Irish creator. And JP hadn't published a lot up to that point, but people have been seeing his colors on pinups, and for a cover, perfect. Like, a cover is basically just a pinup, but it's going to have title credits on it. So we then went to JP to color that. Then when it came to Nate, we asked him the same thing, to have a list of colors, and he said D. Cuniff was on his list, and I was like, I've wanted to hire D at some point. D has done a lot of work with Donny Cates and Ryan Stockman and Ryan Stegman.
Yep.
And I've met him at cons over here because he goes to some of the local cons himself. He's been a guest. I met his wife, not knowing it was his wife. She bought some of my books, so I was just like, okay, I think at some point I need to pay it forward and hire D. And this was the perfect opportunity, and he really made it pop. Yeah, and it's not green. You'll notice, like, if you scroll down, you would see the 3 anthologies that I've done before side by side, and all 3 covers just by accident are green.
Yeah, that first section right there.
There it is. Just 3 green covers. And they're different shades of green, but it's all green. And it's like, spot the Irish lads walking into the convention in the UK.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
we don't need the flag. It's on our books.
Well, this is your first steer away from that. I mean, it's an amazing cover for sure.
It is.
I love this print right here.
Yeah,
too.
the print, that's like a mech wolf in Little Red Riding Hood, right? Big Bad Wolf. Yeah.
So that's Chris Imber, who's he's one of the UK creators. So myself and Gareth met him. I think Gareth met him last, so 2022. He made him a toppable, but then we were talking to him properly then at the last one, so just in November gone, and we were just chatting to him during the MidCon party, and he told me he had an art book of fairy tale stuff. I was like, I must have a look. Picked it up, and I was like, yes, okay, he needs to do a print. And
That's awesome.
and it helped. Like we've been chatting back and forth anyway, because he also got my name wrong at the mid-con party, and it's something we laugh about now.
Nice.
So I have like audio processing stuff, so I didn't even realize that he had. I thought he just said my first initial. Turns out it was he called me Pete, but his accent made me only hear P, and so he introduced me to somebody else then as Pete. I hear P. He goes, "Oh, Paul." To give my full name rather than just the initial, and and he was mortified.
Right.
But I took no offense from it at all.
Right,
Either. I was
right,
just like,
right.
I was like,
Yeah.
I had no idea that what your mistake was. I thought it was just a weird British thing.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
we kept in touch, and we still chat. I'm looking forward to actually seeing him at another con again, because like it's Toppable is great for that.
Yep.
Where you can just meet loads of other creators. I don't know if there's anything like it in the US, but it's
Mhm.
entirely comics. Like their guests are all comic guests. There's no media guests. They end up with like 450 different comic creators in the building.
Wow.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
There's such a wild variety of stuff. Like you don't go to that show to make money, because you're going to end up spending it all on other people's tables.
You're
anyway.
gonna buy a lot of books. Yeah. Yep. That's like bigger than Artist Alley in New York City, I'm pretty sure. That's a lot of creators. 450. That's huge.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't all have like the same scale of book. Like some of them only do small zines that they would like print off at home.
Yeah.
But like they're all producing really interesting work, and there's always something for everyone at it. So it's always expensive to go to. I always come back. My suitcase is always overweight coming back, and my flight's always cancelled coming back. So it's just
it's just your luck. I want to talk about I mean, you talked about how you had over 200 submissions for this, but you have 22 stories in one book here with 88 pages of comics. That's pretty crazy to have 22 stories.
It's the 2000 AD. They do a thing called Future Shocks, which is 4-page stories, and the last page should have a twist on it. Yep. So we were taking that model for Turning Roads, and then we liked that we got to bring in more creators with it. So we kept it at that size. So each book is just 4-page stories, each exploring different aspects of mythology. So we try not to double up on things. I think we've got 2 Banshee stories in Turning Roads, but I don't think there's double ups in the others, except for maybe Thor shows up in 2 stories in Fractured Realms, but they're not the same exploration of Thor. And there's like a dozen different Thor stories, so they were dealing with different things.
I'm just going through the campaign here now, but like these enamel pins that you have as some of these add-ons and things like that. Yeah, these are really cool. Yeah, but they're really cool if you want to talk about those.
So I've got like 500 pins at home hanging up on my wall.
Yeah,
because I'm a crazy person, and at one point then I decided to start making my own. So I started with it's I in my head I call it my necromancy pin. So it's one with the skull on it, and it has producer reviews Reanimate, and it is still like my number 1 bestseller when I go to conventions, because most people are like, oh my god, I'm not a pin person, but that's my vibe.
That's awesome.
And so I do a different pin for each of the anthologies. So I've done like a Celtic Knot one as a microchip for Turning Roads.
Oh, cool.
I did Hades Bident for Down Below. Did some Norse runes that were all just spelling disaster out for Fractured Realms. And then for this one, I decided I'm going to do 3 because I couldn't pick just one. So there's 3 different designs for that. But then you got all the older ones then. So I have some wordy ones. So like Great Minds Read a Lot, which it came from a webcomic, but it's also I used to work for a children's arts charity that focused on reading for pleasure. And so Great Minds Read a Lot isn't actually like an intellect thing, it's a well-being thing. Your mind feels better when you're reading more. And it's more when it's books with words, but not exclusively words. Prose books and comics they help mental well-being better than like audiobooks would, but audiobooks still help. So it's because it's all to do with story and language, and brains are weird.
Yeah, for sure.
True.
and I I kept it. So when I made that one, I decided to make the green speech bubble one. It's an Irish language one. Gary Maloney, who's one of the Limerick lads, he helped me translate it because he's a Gaeilgeoir. I didn't have a 6-year Irish teacher. Let's just say the whole thing with Ireland's history with the Catholic Church has to do with that.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. So that's comics are for everyone, but in Irish.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
And then the orange one, it has a pen sword on it, and it's mightier than the sword. And it was actually just the logo of my newsletter, and I was like, no, I'm gonna make it a pin just for the crack.
Yeah.
Because I end up going to lots of cons where there's writers at them, and then they want to have something worthy to wear on them. So they either go for the one with the book or one with the pen sword.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
I personally like for Fox's sake.
Yes.
That's really good.
That fox is the mascot of a greeting card company I set up to keep myself busy during COVID before I did the anthologies. So his name is Vrua, which is the Irish for red when you're talking about hair color.
And the ones that you have coming out now, you scroll up to the blue picture there, Chris. They kind of hint at some of the stories we're going to see a little further up. Those are the stickers, and then they're the pins. You have you have the obviously the Emerald City. I see is one of them, right?
So but it's an infinite road to like it's an infinite yellow-brick road because it just goes in a full circle.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then there's a Neverland one, right?
Yeah, so it's keyhole portals for Neverland, and then there's a digital map of it's a digital map of Neverland, and it's keyhole portals for Wonderland.
That's so cool.
It's past 9 here, so my brain is falling asleep.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I think these ones are really cool too because they have the sci-fi twist with the themes. So we can expect to see some stories related to that within the anthology.
Yeah, so we have one Alice in Wonderland story. I'm blanking on who wrote it. I can probably open my spreadsheet and find it, but I might end up getting distracted if I open the spreadsheet right now.
It's all right.
And I have a Wizard of Oz story as well. And I had to like push people to pitch those stories. So I was like, they're such big ideas as fairy tales, and they're the most modern version of fairy tale that we have because a lot of everything else is like from the Grimm brothers and I'm not even I'm gonna butcher his name if I say it, but the French guy who did Beauty and the Beast.
I can't think of his name.
But so I was like, I just kept pushing on social media. It's like, we don't have either of those two, and they were so big. And I'm obsessed with Peter Pan, so like that's why I had to do Neverland. So I'm working with Colin Craker on that one. I've only got to work with him once directly, and that was on his series where I wrote a short for a Christmas book that he did. So I was like, no, I want to work with Colin on something that's coming directly from me and not from his characters. And because I'm dealing with Peter Pan as like virtual reality, kind of like Ready Player One, but it's Neverland instead of 80s themed. So I was dealing with that, and Colin's really great at like making technology just pop on a page. So I wanted to get someone in who could do that. I always work with different artists on these things for that reason. I end up jumping around between who's going to deliver something different in a different way.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
So I mean, I'm excited. I really want to be able to have those pins just on the table, be able to explain to people because they're kind of core to the sorts of stories I grew up with.
Right.
It's weird that it took this long for me to do fairy tales, but I think folklore was appealing to people more during the pandemic, and Irish folklore in particular had come up a couple of times at conventions and at events before the pandemic happened. And we were told in Ireland it'll be 6 weeks and then COVID will be over. And 6 months into it, it was still going, and it only got worse because they kept reopening things early. So,
right. Yeah.
So we had to.
Yeah, right. The folklore kind of stuck around.
Real quick, Mike, because I'm not going to do it. I looked up the name of the guy who created Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, Gabriel Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve.
There you go.
Something like that. That was my closest attempt. I knew I was going to butcher it too. but yeah, I think those three you talked about are really cool. And the pins to show them off are even better. I think that's like a really cool way to talk about the project.
Yeah, I love that Wizard of Oz one.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
It was also the easiest one to do. So.
That's great.
The others were so much work, especially the Alice in Wonderland one. Is like I've only got. You end up paying extra for the place I use when you're adding on more and more colors, which makes sense.
Oh yeah.
I was like, okay, so I have to stick with a limited number of colors, and I can't have the same shades of color touch each other, at least not too much. So I was then trying to figure out how to design these things in a way that I wasn't going to overlap all of the colors on top of each other.
Oh wow, yeah.
It was a nightmare, but it was a fun challenge. I'd never given myself a challenge like that before, so it was fun to do.
I like that because it has like the toadstools and the queen in the background there. Yeah, and the Mad Hatter hat in the middle. It's really cool. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny when you say that because I always think of that when you work on something for so long and you're like, this is great, and you're all into it and you put it out there, and it's like people cling on to the simple thing.
Yeah.
Like the easiest part, you're like, dude, that took me like an hour. Oh, the rest of this took me 3 weeks.
Yeah, come on. This one took a lot longer. You should like this one. Yeah.
But I'd done the Neverland one first, and then I was like, okay, I'll do the same thing for the others. So before I got to Wonderland, I was trying to do Oz. Oz is weird. Oz is not what people like. The movie does not tell you what Oz looks like. The movie makes you think that it's just the Yellow Brick Road all the way to the Emerald City. Emerald City is at the middle of what is effectively just a map split into like a grid of 4. It would have been the most boring thing. No one would have recognized it as Oz. So I was like, I think I'd worked on that for like 2 or 3 hours before going, this doesn't look like a pin anyone would want to wear.
Yeah,
so I had to scrap it.
You had to rethink it, right? That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the end result's really, it's interesting.
Yeah, I wanted something different for each of them so that they all look distinct in their own way, but you can see that there's like they're all green. So like I never got away from green, even though I stopped
the green is still there. Yeah, it's not on the cover, but then you just made 3 green.
You just gotta lean into it at this point, man. Like lean right in there.
Yep. All green everywhere. I know this looks like a really cool project to me. As of we're talking now, I mean, you have pretty much the rest of the month to go and already 115 backers. So that's pretty good solid start there. I know that I think anthologies are becoming more and more popular. I think this is a really cool premise, sci-fi and fairy tales.
I think that's the marker for my Kickstarter is weird because the trend goes up and down every year.
Mm-hmm.
So we got really lucky with Down Below. We just happened to be like completely on trend with Greek myth and anthologies. People liked both of those ideas separately, and so that one did amazingly well. And then last year was a struggle. I know we have bigger targets than we had last year, and there's no guarantee this one is happening. Whereas last year had Arts Council funding, so it's more of a challenge this year. But we've also got a lot of new creators in the book than we've had in the past. So we've got a good spread of people who have never published before. I mean, at this point, I've published over 150 different people between Limit Break and Irish Comics Today. So it'll be nice to add to that number a bit and to add to the countries that we're all coming from as well. I think we've had a few Canadians already, so it's like we're not getting new Canadians, but it's not a new country to add to the list. But we've got like James Nadiga and Megan Huang pitched the story to us, and myself and Gary were really just like, we need to have this one. And I didn't even, so I don't look to see who's sent in the pitches until I have to review the portfolios. And their story is Isun Boshi, which is a Japanese fairy tale, the 1-inch man. And I read the pitch. I was like, I need this story in the book.
That's
and
cool.
Then Gary's like, have you seen who this creators are? I was like, no. Please tell me that at least one of them is Asian. Because we have had that where it's just a bunch of white people pitching African or Asian stories, and I was like, you're not the person to write that story.
Yeah.
Like, there's the reason
Yeah.
why I didn't do an African folklore book, because I am very white.
Yeah.
I would not feel comfortable telling people this is how the story should go.
Yeah. When you,
So, like,
yeah, if you've ever been there either, like, no, I've never set foot there. Like, yeah. Yeah.
Well, when I was doing like looking back at your past projects, because I remember seeing the goal and I was like, that's an ambitious goal, and it is, but you've had pretty ambitious goals for the last few, and I'm actually impressed. As I forget which one it was, but you had over 800 backers for one of them.
Oh yeah,
so
down below.
Yeah, it was down below. So I mean, it seems like you got people that are coming in and like the idea. Even if you are seeing ups and downs, it's impressive to me they're getting that many people coming in.
Yeah, returning fans. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like there are people who come back each time, which is like I recognize some of the names now when they back. It's like, oh, that person's back another one. Thank God.
Yeah.
I didn't turn them off.
And
yeah,
I just
we tend to get a few repeat readers, which is nice.
That's great.
It's Limit Break generally we have if you have a few repeat people coming in. And then we have some people who, when it's their first projects that they're backing. Like last year, someone bought literally every single book that we had available.
Wow!
So I had to tape several envelopes together because I didn't have a box for them. So it was just loads and loads of envelopes taped together, wrapped up with bubble wrap and everything. I was like, I don't care how much the postage costs. He gave us all of the money. So,
yeah. So there you go.
That's the same part for, because we talked to a lot of U.S. comic creators, being U.S. based and that being the biggest market, but I always feel for even Canadian creators, like the shipping just across that imaginary line that we made up, just goes through the roof to ship it. And I get it coming from Ireland or England, like you're going over an ocean, like there's some risk there, but it's crazy how much it costs.
It's still cheaper for us to ship from here to there than the other way around.
Yeah.
USPS,
really?
Yeah. The US Postal Service charges way more than the Irish Postal Service does for the same trip, just in the opposite direction.
Wow.
Like it's why when I'm backing US comic creators on Kickstarter, unless I'm picking up several of their books in one go, I'm only getting digital because you end up paying at least as much as the book is worth for postage. And I mean, at least, like, I mean, for a single issue, there was an American guy, Bob Takic. So he'd been in Ireland for a while. I met him, and he finally kickstarted his comic, and it was like $5 or $6 for a single issue. I was like, great, I'll back Bob's book. And I go in, and the postage, which was the actual postage, he wasn't just scamming people. The postage was like $15 for a single issue of a comic. I was like, okay, digital only, because I can't justify paying $20 for a single issue of a comic, and then have to pay customs when it comes into the country as well.
That's crazy.
I knew a guy that lived on the border of Canada, right above us, above New York. And I don't know how he worked it out, but he must have knew somebody, had it shipped to their place in like Niagara Falls, which those that don't know is like literally split into two on the border of the US and Canada, and would cross the border, pick up his stuff and come back because the shipping just across that, like that couple of feet crossing the border was like double.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's like Canadian customs taxes and all that, but that aside, like it's just outrageous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing, the postage is constantly going up as well. All over the world. So it's just it's becoming more difficult to ask people for money for these things. But
so we'll talk about that, because I do appreciate you do have an all digital option. That's something I look for. I do a lot of digital now. But as we're chatting and this episode is coming out, you should have about one more day left for this early bird copy, which is a very affordable $12 for our listeners and our viewers for the whole copy. But then you have the add-ons, like you said, for the pins, so you can get a whole pin, one of the nice pins with the copy of the book for like about $25, which is still pretty reasonable.
I will say the postage on the pins internationally has gone stupidly high, because they now make me have to pay registered post for the lapel pin. And that was something I introduced after I had done the funding for Fractured Realms, but before I'd done the fulfillment. So,
wow.
so suddenly I was paying extra to ship books that had pins internationally than I'd been able to charge people for it. So,
that's crazy.
If they hadn't done that, then the pins would have been a much more appealing option to people, I think, because the postage just shot up on it, which is awful.
Yeah, and I wanted to say to everybody, like, it's actually United States is, other than the United Kingdom, is the cheapest shipping option.
Yep.
I was shocked by that when I'm going through it.
It's Europe, UK, and then US.
Oh, Czech Republic's got us beat.
Oh man! So I need Czech Republic pins.
That's because they're in the Europe bracket on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So it's literally just, and it's all because they have the. So actually, my day job now is working in an association to do with freight forwarding, which is the shipping of goods around the world. So it's literally just that the lines of the supply chain is connected across Europe. So once it gets to mainland Europe, it's easier to get it anywhere. But then the UK with Brexit, they ruined it for everyone. So
of course.
So this is one of those things, like, I never check this because it's United States, it pops up like, you know, we're number one, so we pop up first. All jokes, everybody jokes. But so yeah, it's always the United States on mine, so I never check it. And I look through and I'm like, dude, they got Zimbabwe taken care of on here.
Yeah.
Good for you, Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I know. Places you never thought you'd ship a comic. Yeah.
The thing is, some places you can't actually ship to.
Yeah.
There's there are countries I can't ship to from Ireland. They just
they just don't allow
the postage doesn't exist. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know why.
That's crazy. They're like, no, we don't associate with them.
And I'm not even talking North Korea. I mean other countries.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And Mike brought up the early bird, which is, so to bring it to US dollars, because I think that's the majority of our audience, but you can look to see it's all in euros on the Kickstarter when you guys go to look at it. We're talking $12 for, and he says 88 pages.
Yep.
Yeah, an 88-page anthology. That's good. And even if you miss that, $15 is still a good price too.
Really, yeah.
And if you're digital like Mike here, $6.
That's crazy.
How do you get it so cheap, sir?
So I have I've got a calculator. Like I made a spreadsheet to calculate price points. So I know how much it costs me to print them, and then I literally plug that into the calculator, and it'll tell me how much I should be charging. And I
feel like we're getting ripped off, Chris, on most of our other Kickstarters. Yeah.
Do you guys have a
I see.
printer?
So I use Comic Printing UK, which, and because it's books and it's printed materials, there's no added customs on top of it. So like I'm lucky that way. I understood all of that before I contacted him. Excuse me. So he keeps his prices as low as he can, but obviously he has to make a living. He does have a child. Even if his wife brings in the big bucks, he does need to actually pay to keep his business going.
Right.
But he's also an expert at printing comics. Like it's slightly cheaper to go with other people, but his service has never let me down. So I keep going with him, and he's not local to me, but he's local to Thought Bubble, which is the big con that we launched the books at. And so it's like going with a small local to the con business.
Cool.
And like we get along with them, and now the two of us just obsess over Has Been Hotel on Twitter. So
I've heard that show's really good. Yeah, I gotta watch that show.
I described it to a friend as horny Steven Universe.
Okay, perfect. Sold. That's amazing. I have a calculator that tells me the price I need to put the books at, and depending on how many extra stories are in it, the price will change. So Turning Roads, when it started, so that was the first one. That was €12. That had 18 stories in it. Wow.
And then Down Below went from 18 stories to 22. So I'd added on €1 because I couldn't add on 50 cents because that Kickstarter doesn't work on anything that isn't whole numbers.
Interesting.
And then Fractured Realms added another €1, and then this one same size as Down Below, so it's the same price. So
cool.
It's absolutely crazy to me because I'm going through your page and I'm I just clicked the back for the digital to see pricing and everything. And you even have a digital anthology bundle that has the other 3. So you get this anthology, then the other 3. And once again, US dollars, but altogether $19 for 4 big anthology books. Kudos,
Yeah,
man.
I
That's
mean,
amazing.
Yeah.
Digital's free to distribute, so
Right.
like the idea is like it brings up the money that the Kickstarter's taking in. It doesn't cost us anything to send it out.
Yeah.
Like a single digital copy is paying for a physical copy of the book.
That's
So
that's the best philosophy to have about it right there, I think.
And the idea is just to get more people reading them. Like we want more
Right.
people reading comics generally, and also reading our work,
Yep.
in a specific sense. So like, and people then use the add-on function on Kickstarter to add in the other books that we've worked on, which the profit margins of those are actually worse. The profit margin on a trade paperback is better than on a floppy now, because the cost of producing comics has just shot up. But we've managed to just build up readerships that way, just people adding on the other books.
Yep.
Which is it's been nice that way, where we've just had people just support because they're getting a good deal on the anthologies.
Yeah.
And this is all just because I worked in a bookshop for almost 8 years, and I like, in my head, books don't cost that much.
So yeah, right. You don't think they would, right? Yeah, and I think before we wrap up and stuff, we didn't talk about we talked about most of the options you can back, and then there's the one that includes everything, all the pins in the book, and then you have add-ons of your past work, and then there's a tote bag that you created of a very specific blue hair fairy from the Pinocchio story, the original Pinocchio story. So that's a pretty cool tote bag. It's like almost like a futuristic circuit board design of the character that you have available too. So that's cool.
I wanted to go back to the original story of Pinocchio.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was because some of the early pitches I got, people were like, "Oh, so it's based on the Disney story." It's like, well, I can't publish that. So
right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If it's in copyright, I can't publish that. But
right.
So I was like, okay, what's the blue fairy like in the myth? Because I know that like everyone knows the blue fairy.
Yep.
And that's when I realized Disney just made her a fairy in a blue dress instead of fairy blue hair. And it's like, okay, so now she's dressed like one of the regular princesses from Disney. They made her a lot less interesting. So I was like, I'm gonna bring her back to her roots. And that pun intended.
Yep. That's very cool. Very cool design. Yeah, I'm really excited for the project. And there's still about a month left, so I think everybody should go and check it out.
Yeah. I just want to say real quick, I do a regular thing on my Substack about crowdfunding and trying to spotlight different stuff. And one of the things I say a lot is when it's always fun. I know creators may not like this because you want someone to get you at the first one and follow you through so that you're always funding. But like, it's always fun as somebody outside when I find someone interesting and I go back and they've got like 4 or 5 books that they've done. And I have all this stuff to go back on because now I got this thing that looks interesting and then add on 3 other, in your case, 3 other books on top of that.
Yep.
It's awesome that it's unfortunate we didn't meet earlier, but at the same time, it's awesome because now I got a ton of comics to read.
Yeah. It is really cool. Yep. I think that's awesome too. I was surprised when I looked at these projects. Like we should have had you on earlier, Paul. But yeah, thanks so much for your time today. If you want our listeners and our viewers, obviously we're going to push them towards this Kickstarter, Wish Upon a Star on Kickstarter right now. But if you want to send them to everything you're doing, if you have a social media that you want to talk about or push anybody there, where can they find you?
I think websites are probably easier because social media is constantly changing.
Yeah.
So my personal website is paulcarrollwriter.com. That's writer with a W. And the publisher website, publisher collective, is limitbreakcomics.com.
Okay, great.
Awesome. And to everybody out there watching, listening, hearing this as a car drives by, however you're getting this podcast, check those show notes down below and I'll have links to all of Paul's websites, but most importantly, the Kickstarter page. So you can click on that, check it out. I promise you guys, it looks awesome. So do that right now.
Yep.
Paul, thanks so much for stopping by and come and chat with us. We really appreciate it, and we definitely got to do it again for a future project you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.